Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Honourable John Howard, the 25th Prime Minister of Australia, who will in turn introduce our guest speaker, the Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian. It's not surprising, given all that's happened since, that there's great nostalgia throughout Australia for the era known as the Howard Costello years. They made it look easy. As we now know, it isn't. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John Howard.
Thank you, Joe, for that very kind introduction. You don't know what a big risk you've taken, giving me a microphone in front of an enormous crowd. My home city, you talk about nostalgia, you better be careful I don't get nostalgic about addressing a 900-strong gathering in the city of Sydney and warming to some of my favourite subjects, and that is extolling the virtues of people who practice liberalism in government. And before I do that, can I say how truly delighted I am to be part of an event organised by the Sydney Institute. Sydney Institute stands for something that is very important in our society, and that is providing a framework for the contest of ideas and values. If I took from my years in politics any beliefs about the nature of politics, the most important of those was that above everything else, politics is a contest of ideas and a contest of values. It's not a public relations exercise. And it so happens that tomorrow I will have the opportunity to visit a dear friend of mine, Sir John Carrick, who for many years was the General Secretary of the Liberal Party in New South Wales. God willing, he will turn 100 in September of this year. And I can honestly say he had a greater influence on forming my political beliefs and values than any other person. And of the many thoughts that he left with me, the one that dominated them all was exactly what I've just said, that politics is a contest of ideas, it's a contest of values. It's not a public relations exercise. And the Sydney Institute has played a mighty role in creating the environment for that contest. I congratulate Gerard. Of course, he and I go back a long way. He once worked for me, the poor unfortunate soul. Nothing much happened. I mean, we had the beginnings of the Joe for PM campaign. I mean, you talk about nostalgia. I wasn't nostalgic for that, but he was always somebody who was interested in ideas. And it was not surprising that he, ably assisted by his wife Anne, has built the Sydney Institute to what it is today. It is a marvellous organisation. But he is not, of course, the main speaker tonight. The main speaker tonight is my very good friend and a person I admire enormously, Gladys Berejiklian, the Premier of New South Wales. Gladys represents many things about the triumphs of post-World War II Australia. She demonstrates that we have a society in which ability and application and hard work can be rewarded. She is an exemplar of one of the great success stories of our country, and that is the remarkable contribution of migration in post-World War II Australia. She came from a different country from this. She reserves, of course, with her parents, an affection for that home culture. But she became, and her family became, very much part of the mainstream of Australia. And that ideal of attracting and taking people from the four corners of the earth, but when they arrive, they are united behind a common set of Australian values, has always been the secret of a successful migration policy. I salute Gladys's achievements as a Premier. She brings high intelligence and hard work. She brings a strong commitment to the Australian fair go and to Liberal values. She was a successful Minister for Transport and Treasurer. And we see in the dynamism and the energy of Sydney and the rest of New South Wales now what enormous benefits she and her two predecessors as Premier, Barry O'Farrell, who's here tonight, and Mike Baird, brought to that. New South Wales has been humming now for a number of years, the like of which many of us who've lived in Sydney all our lives have forgotten might have been possible. She's brought great balance to her job, but most importantly of all, she's brought that priceless ingredient in public life of character. Whenever you see Gladys on television or hear her on radio, you're listening, you're looking at, or you're listening to somebody who believes in something and believes very passionately in looking after the interests of her fellow Australians. So I am really very privileged to count her as a friend, somebody I admire, and I have great pleasure in inviting her to address you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Howard, for that overly generous introduction. It's an honour to be here and a special honour to have been introduced by you, our greatest living Prime Minister. In fact, I was just recalling recently that I received one of my first important lessons back in 1996 when I was the newly elected President of the New South Wales Young Liberals, and I had the audacity to write to the then newly elected Prime Minister of the nation, suggesting he should meet with me and hear what young people thought about the future of our nation. Not only did he agree to meet with me, but he genuinely cared about what I was saying. And it was an important lesson for me in political humility and also the need to listen, a principle I've tried to adopt myself in public life. Mr Howard, thank you for your ongoing contribution and your inspiration to many Australians, and we look forward to your contribution to public debate into the future. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, when Gerard first invited me to give this address, I was taken aback given the calibre of past dinner guests. And then I confess, I thought, great, what a perfect opportunity to tell you all about what a great government we are, that New South Wales is the economic and infrastructure powerhouse of the nation, and outline my plans for the future of New South Wales and taking New South Wales to the next level. That was until Gerard, in classic Gerard form, made clear that it was a terrible idea. I think his exact words were, "No one is interested in that." He'll always give you frank advice. Gerard instead suggested that I share some of my personal story, not something that comes easily to me. In public life, part of my MO has been not to stray from core business. After all, I've been elected to do a job and to do it well. I've always adopted the genuine view that it's not about me, it's about the people that make up this great state. But I accept that all of us are shaped by our upbringing, our background and our experiences. I accept that as a daughter of a welder and a nurse who migrated here from different parts of the Middle East, and as someone who didn't speak English when I started school, I may have some insights to share about leadership and our society more broadly. My experiences have given me the perspective that hard work and respect are the greatest indicators of future success, not your background nor your postcode. This perspective is fundamental to how I seek to answer the questions that, as Premier, obsess me every day. What will give New South Wales the edge in 10 or 20 years from now? What decisions should I be taking today to provide the best opportunities for our citizens in the future? The fact is, New South Wales cannot afford to stand still. We are a state of only millions in a region of billions. The digital age means our external environment is changing more rapidly than at any other time in human history. In the future, we will rely more heavily than ever before on the ingenuity of our people. We must give people the confidence that if they work hard and take chances, they can have a great life in New South Wales. That hard work and innovation will in turn support our economic growth and strengthen our communities. But of course, reward for effort only works when government provides equality of opportunity. That is, enabling job creation, providing skills, education and access to vital services which give people the choices they need to lead their best lives possible. We cannot take for granted that the values and the systems that make New South Wales and Australia great places they are can never be taken for granted. Here, every citizen has freedoms and opportunities that very few other places in the world offer, where universal healthcare, high standards of education and support for the most vulnerable are an absolute given. The sense we should be grateful for this is absolutely ingrained in me. So too is the responsibility to give back. We are seeing massive social dislocation and disruption around the world in places that lack the opportunities we benefit from here in New South Wales. So we must ever be more vigilant in protecting what makes us uniquely placed to tackle the future head-on. As with so many other Australians, our nation's generosity provided a safe haven for my family after generations of persecution. I try to demonstrate my gratitude every day by dedicating myself to making New South Wales the best it can be. As some of you may know, my family were victims of the Armenian genocide of 1915. My grandparents were orphaned and witnessed untold atrocities. More than 40 of my relatives were among the 1.5 million Armenians massacred in what became the first genocide of the 20th century. Those who survived, including my grandparents, were forced to leave their homeland, were displaced across the region and eventually settled in the Middle East. My father was born in Aleppo, Syria, where we still have family, and my mother was born in Jerusalem. Suffice to say, the safe haven offered by the Middle East was short-lived. My parents migrated separately to Sydney in the late 1960s and were married in the Armenian Orthodox Church in Chatswood. They spoke Armenian at home, not only because it was their first language, but also because they felt a responsibility to preserve their heritage given the atrocities committed against our family and the Armenian people. They were determined to make sure my sisters and I were bilingual and proud of our heritage. But they were equally adamant that we became good citizens and gave back to the nation that welcomed them. As their firstborn, my first language was Armenian. I remember getting ready for school on my first day and my mother encouraged me not to worry if I didn't understand everything, but just to make sure I raised my hand and had a go every time the teacher asked a question. And in fact, I don't actually ever remember learning English, it just happened. I remember in the same year that I started school, coming back after a short stay in hospital to have my tonsils out. The teacher asked me to talk about my experience in hospital, and that was my first recollection of speaking my version of fluent English. We grew up in a very family-oriented community in North Ryde, where we became friends with the neighbours' kids. They were of great assistance in becoming accustomed to the Australian way of life, including the lingo. The Aggett family across the road, for instance, had an above-ground swimming pool, which was something of a novelty. One hot summer's day when I was about 8 or 9, Mrs. Aggett was talking to my mother and said I could come over for a swim after tea. I chimed in and suggested my mother hurry up and put the kettle on so I could rush over to use their pool. Clearly, my Aussie lingo still had a way to go. But within this close-knit family unit, my parents never for a minute allowed my two sisters and I to forget the incredible opportunities we had in modern Australia. Opportunities they never had. Despite both being very intelligent and well-read, my parents hadn't even had the chance to finish high school themselves. They worked hard and expected my sisters and I to do the same. As a trained nurse, my mother always went above and beyond, even helping neighbours with their medical needs. We were also so incredibly proud that as a Boilermaker welder, my dad worked on the second highest sale of the Opera House. He was very specific that it was the second highest sale. Luckily, I loved school. At primary school, I was good at maths, but I owe a huge debt to the school librarian, who borrowed books from other schools once I had read the entire biography collection at North Ryde Public. Looking back, that love of reading really saved me. It helped me develop my skills in English and open my eyes to the ways of the world. While we attended North Ryde Public during weekdays, we attended Armenian school in Willoughby on Saturdays, where we became fluent in reading and writing. My dad also thought it was wise to send us to girls' club at the local Anglican church on Monday nights. He figured it would aid our religious instruction, but also help us become loyal citizens. As I approached high school, there were conversations about wanting to send me to private school. It didn't work out, so I ended up at North Ryde High. And back in the 80s, North Ryde High undeservedly had a bad reputation. My parents worried because none of the kids we knew who went to North Ryde High had ever gone to uni. And my parents, as you can imagine, were obsessed with me going to uni. I was obsessed with that too, not to fulfil my parents' ambition, but mine. I knew I wanted to make a difference and make my family's sacrifices worthwhile. I was extremely competitive and wanted good marks, but from the talk of the kids I hung with in our neighbourhood, I was doomed. Based on what the local kids told me, every kid who went to North Ryde High was bashed up or was forced to take drugs. This petrified me. I didn't even know what drugs were at the time, but it sounded very bad. I just wanted to do well. Needless to say, these fears were unjustified. These formative years toughened me up, taking me outside my comfort zone in the protection of a very tight family unit. I learned to be self-disciplined and self-motivated and to work hard. I was inspired by some amazing teachers who went over and above to encourage and support me, and ultimately launched me on a path to university, to the private sector, and eventually into public life. My childhood experience, as outlined by former Prime Minister Howard, is by no means unique. It has defined so many Australians of migrant backgrounds who are determined to work hard, to give back and to contribute in their way to the betterment of our state and our nation. In an ever-changing world with increasing challenges, the debate about the nature and scale of immigration is a constant one. In Australia, I believe our current level of migration is about right, but we cannot ignore the reality that communities are feeling growing pressures on local services and infrastructure. At the same time, if we want to continue to prosper as a state and as a nation, we cannot underestimate the benefits that successive waves of immigration have brought to our nation. Work ethic, skills, talent and energy from all around the world. This is a critical part of what will give New South Wales its edge in the future. I make no apologies for stressing that the right to be a citizen in this country brings with it responsibilities. Whether our families have been here for thousands of years, many generations, or even just one generation such as mine, we must ensure all of us share a desire to be responsible citizens and to give back to the community where we can. We need to support those willing to work hard, take risks and put New South Wales on the global map. The aspiration for a better life is what motivates our people to work hard and do amazing things, the kind of things that propel our state forward. But we can only unlock that aspiration if we prepare rigorously for the decades ahead. Within our federation, it is the states that are on the front line of delivering the infrastructure and services that our communities and our economies need. I am therefore proposing that an entire meeting of COAG next year should be dedicated solely to the issue of immigration and planning. And this should just not be a one-off discussion, but revisited every few years. We need to be focused and disciplined when planning for our future. I keep coming back to the question about what will give New South Wales the edge. It is a question which fills me with a sense of urgency and a sense of determination. Industries and jobs are changing faster than ever before. It's hard to predict where technology will take us in the next 5 years, let alone the next 10 or 20 years. And we must never forget we are in a global competition for skills, talent and ideas. As Thomas Friedman wrote in The World is Flat, more people in more places can now compete, connect and collaborate equal power and equal tools than ever before. Politically and economically, these changes mean that old ideological distinctions are being broken down. People increasingly refuse to be bound by outdated concepts or preconceptions about how they fit into society or where they sit in the pecking order of the economy. Socio-economic mobility is the new normal. When tradies can earn more than lawyers, millennials change career every few years, and with women taking on more than 60% of all new jobs in New South Wales, we are seeing a realignment of the challenges and opportunities available to every person in every community across the state. This new normal makes the role of a good government firmly that of enabler, the creator of opportunity and choice, not the manipulative entrencher of political division as our political opponents consistently prove themselves to be. Every day I meet people from the widest possible range of backgrounds, occupations, postcodes, their views shaped by the most diverse experiences, but all driven by the same aspiration to build a better life for themselves and their community. I'm inspired by people like Paul Breen, a construction executive who's launched a training program called Productivity Bootcamp in Penrith. His program identifies young people who are slipping through the employment cracks, trains them so they graduate with a trade, and most importantly, gives them the confidence, discipline and motivation to go on to have great careers. With his drive to contribute to our economy and society, Paul Breen epitomises the power of individual aspiration. He and the millions of Australians like him are why I reject the political dogma that tries to define people by their occupation, postcode or background, a false class warfare that in 2018 is well and truly passé. As far as I'm concerned, the Liberal Party will always be the true party of the worker, not just some workers, but all workers. My government is here to support anyone who wants to work hard to strive for a good life for themselves and their families. I believe that aspiration and work ethic cannot and should not be defined by class, but by attitude, and we see that in action in New South Wales every day. The challenges we face and we confront in securing our future are real, but if we face them, own them and respond to them with focus and determination, we can take New South Wales to the next level. New South Wales is a state that tackles the difficult things, whether it's finding innovative solutions to repairing our budget and creating the strongest economy in the nation, delivering the largest infrastructure pipeline in Australia's history, or adopting a citizen-centric approach to delivering services essential to our communities. We recognise that our economic dynamism rests on government providing the confidence and certainty for business to grow and individual talent to flourish. This spirit of collaboration has made New South Wales Australia's first $500 billion economy, an economy bigger than Hong Kong and Singapore, growing faster than 27 OECD nations and driving more than half of all economic growth in Australia. Not bad. Over the past 3 years alone, New South Wales has created almost 300,000 jobs and recorded the nation's lowest unemployment for 34 consecutive months. New South Wales is leading the nation because we are a magnet for talent and ambition. It is our greatest asset and one we should never take for granted. We have to ask ourselves, where is the next wave of skills and ideas coming from? We must make sure that government, business and our education institutions are working hand in hand to unlock the extraordinary talent in our workforces, our schools and our tertiary institutions. New South Wales is at its best when we prepare for the long term, like Macquarie in the 19th century and Bradfield in the 20th century. And more than ever today, we know that our economic edge must be built on sustainable growth and good planning. Securing a strong future requires accepting the challenges of growth, planning for them and dealing with them, not hiding from them or worse, using them as an example to do nothing. If we're going to give the next generation of young people in New South Wales the same opportunities as the generations before them, we need to act now to build the infrastructure that will support them, the jobs that will sustain them and the choices that will enable them to live their best possible life. Apologies, Gerard, I know I've digressed back to form, but I need to get a few things off my chest. And what are some of the ways that we're delivering for the future? We're reshaping Greater Sydney into a metropolis of 3 cities. We're ensuring that industries and jobs of the future are spread evenly across the eastern CBD, which is where we are now, Parramatta, our second city, and the new Western Sydney around Badgerys Creek, supported by the tens of thousands of future jobs in areas like defence, advanced manufacturing, robotics and logistics, which will be created by the second airport precinct. We will invest like never before in the great enablers of education, transport and healthcare, but we'll also make sure that our government fulfils its responsibilities as the custodian of our environment, our heritage, our open spaces and the local character of our communities. But whilst I know I'm here at the Sydney Institute, it's not just about Sydney. We need to leave behind the stereotype of the divide between our cities and our regions and embark on the next generation of nation-building regional projects, which I firmly believe have to include fast rail. Let's be honest, as a nation, we've talked about it for long enough. We need to get on with planning it now. And improving the connectivity between our cities and major regional centres will enable the next wave of economic opportunity to spread across this great state. And it will certainly be a catalyst for even greater investment in the social infrastructure our regional communities need. As a responsible government, we'll focus relentlessly on unlocking that next wave of infrastructure, investment and jobs. But we'll also use the dividends of a strong economy to give a helping hand to those hit hardest by the cost of living and to offer opportunity to those who would otherwise be denied it. We'll work every day to ensure that everyone in New South Wales has the choice and opportunity to live the best life they can, to secure the true equality of opportunity that will strengthen our state and our nation for the challenges ahead. This is what will give New South Wales the edge. As Premier, I want a strong, confident New South Wales, moving decisively forward, staking its place, owning the future and leading Australia and the world. We are on the cusp of this today. And I will always keep working my guts out to make sure that New South Wales is a place where every person has greater opportunities than their parents and grandparents, where everyone has the chance to reach their potential, realise their ambitions and live their most fulfilling lives possible. After all, that is my story. Thank you very much.
At our table before the address which the Premier's just given, we spoke about some similarities in background, and it was that heartwarming rendition of her own life that explains, that animates, and which gives passion to the Premier's vision for New South Wales. Please join me in thanking her for that remarkable address. It gives me great pleasure to call on Carmel Mulhern from Telstra to propose the formal vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to offer a vote of thanks to Premier Gladys Berejiklian for her inspiring and authentic remarks this evening. It is always a privilege to hear firsthand the ideas and influences that have shaped and that are challenging the minds of our political leaders, and often those views reach us through a number of filters, so to be